Time passed, and I gradually adapted to life in the village. I was no longer just a soldier living in memories, but a part of the present. The nightmares of war still came late at night, but I no longer woke up in panic. I learned to live with them as part of my life. The villagers slowly became more open to me. They no longer looked at me with pity but saw me as family. I helped them repair houses, carry water, rebuild roads, and, most importantly, I spent time telling stories to the village children. They were fascinated when I talked about brave soldiers, long marches through the forest, and how my comrades and I shared every last piece of dry ration in times of hunger. But I didn't hide the truth about war. I told them about the losses, the pain it caused. I wanted them to understand that peace is the most precious thing. One day, as I was telling a story, a boy suddenly asked, "Uncle, do you want to get married?" The children burst into laughter, while I was taken aback. I had never thought about it before. For so many years, I had lived only with my memories, with the things I had lost, never considering starting something new. But that boy's question made me think. The next day, while fixing the fence at Mrs. Land's house, I met a young woman about 10 years younger than me, who had recently moved to the village. Mai was a widow, raising her child alone, making a living by growing vegetables and selling goods. The first time we met, she greeted me with a gentle smile. "You're the soldier who returned to the village, right?" I nodded. Mai didn't ask me about the war, didn't look at me with curiosity or pity like others. She simply said, "After you fix Mrs. Land's fence, can you help me with my gate?" The storm knocked it down. I was surprised, but then smiled and agreed. From that day on, Mai and I met more often. She would bring me some sweet potatoes or fresh vegetables, saying, "I have some extras, you should eat more to stay strong." Gradually, I felt warmth in my heart whenever I was with her. Not in a rush, not forced, Mai quietly entered my life like a gentle breeze, like the sunlight after a storm. One day, after I finished repairing her gate, Mai stood beside me, smiling softly. "Hoa, if one day you want a home, my son and we also need a man in the house." I froze. For years, I thought I had lost everything. I never imagined having a family, a home again. But at that moment, looking into Mai's gentle eyes, I realized I could start over. That harvest season, Mai and I held a small meal, inviting the villagers to celebrate with us. No grand ceremony, no lavish gifts, just a simple meal, but it was the happiest day of my life since returning. I was no longer a soldier wandering through memories. I had found where I belonged, a new meaning to my life. Every morning, Mai and I went to the fields together, planting vegetables, harvesting rice. Every afternoon, I taught Mai's young son how to carve wood, telling him stories, not just about war, but about peace, about life. One evening, as the sun set, Mai asked me, "Do you still remember the war?" I looked out at the golden rice fields and sighed. "Of course, how could I forget?" Mai held my hand and whispered, "But now, you are living in peace." I nodded. War was a part of the past, but peace is the future. And I would cherish every moment of this life so that the sacrifices of the past would not be in vain. Because I now knew, even though I had lost so much, I still had the most important thing of all, the chance to live, to love, and to build a better tomorrow. Life went on, peaceful like the river flowing through the village. I had grown accustomed to waking up early to go to the fields with Mai and spending the evenings by the fire, telling stories to her son. But no matter how much I tried, the past was still a part of me. One day, while repairing the roof of an elderly woman's house, I heard news that a group of war veterans from different regions was visiting the village. My heart pounded with an indescribable feeling as I hurried over. And then, I saw them, old comrades I once thought had perished on the battlefield. The first person I recognized was Tone, the man who had saved me from an artillery strike years ago. He looked older now, his eyes weary from years of hardship. My voice trembled as I called his name. "Tone. You're alive?" Tone turned around, staring at me in shock. A long pause passed before he pulled me into a tight embrace, his voice breaking. Hoa, I thought you didn't make it. We sat down beneath the old banyan tree at the village entrance, the same place where young men once gathered before marching off to war. The memories came flooding back. Tone told me that after our last battle, he had been severely wounded and sent to the rear. When the war ended, he returned to his hometown only to find that his family was gone. He wandered from place to place, taking odd jobs to survive. When he heard about a veterans' reunion, he decided to join the trip. I looked at him and saw not only joy in his eyes, but also a deep, lingering sadness. Are there any others? I asked anxiously. Tone shook his head. Only a few of us left. Most of our brothers never came home. I fell silent. A gentle breeze carried the scent of ripening rice, but inside, I felt an old sorrow rising again. That night, Tone and I sat by the fire, sipping tea that Ma had brewed. He told me about those who had passed, about those who had survived, but had no place to return to. Do you remember Tin? He was badly wounded and lost a leg. He's now living in the next town, fixing motorbikes to make ends meet. Tin. The youngest soldier in our unit, the boy who always talked about his dream of opening a woodworking shop after the war. My hands clenched into fists. Take me to him tomorrow. I need to see him. The next morning, Tone and I walked to the town. In a small alley, we stopped in front of a modest repair shop. A man sat on a wooden stool, his right leg missing, his face marked with scars. Tin. I called softly. The man looked up, his eyes widening in shock. He stammered. Brother Hoa? You're alive? I nodded, and before I could say another word, Tin pulled me into an embrace, crying like a child. We sat together, sharing stories of our years apart. Tin smiled, telling me that he still held on to his dream of opening a woodworking shop, but life had been too difficult. I looked at his hands, still strong, still full of determination. If you want, come back to the village with me. We'll build that workshop together. I know woodworking too. Tin looked up, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Really, brother? I nodded firmly. And so, a new journey began. A few months later, Tin moved to the village, and together we set up a small woodworking shop by the river. The first days were tough, but over time, we crafted beautiful wooden furniture, selling them to villagers and nearby towns. Tin was no longer a disabled soldier. He became a skilled woodworker, a man with dreams and hope. One evening, as the sun set, he turned to me and said, I once thought my life was over when I lost my leg. But because of you, I realized that I still have so much to do. I patted his shoulder, smiling. We don't live just to remember the past, we live to build the future. I had lost so much in the war. But now, I had found my brothers again. I had found meaning in life once more. And I understood that, though war had taken so much from us, it could never take away our faith in tomorrow. As days passed, the woodworking shop that Tin and I built started to gain recognition in the village. People from nearby areas came to order furniture, and with each finished piece, I could see the pride in Tin's eyes. He was no longer just a wounded veteran struggling to survive, he was a craftsman, a man with purpose. Ma often brought us meals, staying to chat as we worked. She and Tin got along well, joking about the old days, about how we used to share scraps of food in the trenches. One evening, as we were finishing up for the day, Tin leaned against the doorframe and said, Brother Hoa, I want to bring my mother here. She's living alone in the town, and I don't want her to spend her last years in loneliness. I nodded without hesitation. Of course, Tin. This village is big enough for all of us. A week later, an old woman arrived, her back slightly bent with age, but her eyes still full of warmth. She looked at me and Tone, recognizing us instantly. Ah, you boys used to eat all the food I sent to the unit, she laughed. Tina's mother settled in quickly, helping Ma with the garden and teaching the village children songs from the old days. For the first time in years, it felt like we had a real family again. One afternoon, as I was carving a wooden chair, a stranger arrived at the shop. He was thin, his clothes worn, and there was something familiar about him. When he removed his hat, I froze. Hoa, it's me. Nia. Nia. The man who had once been our fearless leader. The man who had carried wounded soldiers on his back in the middle of enemy fire. But the Nia standing before me now was different. His once powerful frame had become frail, his face lined with hardship. Nia, where have you been all these years? I asked, gripping his shoulders. He sighed, sitting down heavily. After the war, I wandered from place to place. I couldn't find my family, they were all gone. I had nowhere to go. There was silence. Tin, Tone, and I exchanged glances. We knew that feeling, the emptiness of returning from war only to find everything changed. I brought Nia a bowl of warm soup, and for the first time in years, I saw tears well up in his eyes. I thought I would die alone, he whispered. I placed a firm hand on his. Not anymore. Stay here. This village is your home now. And so, another brother returned. Life continued peacefully for many years. Our small shop became well known, and soon, we started training younger men in the village. But time does not wait for anyone. One winter morning, we found Tone sitting on the porch, his eyes gazing at the horizon. He was unusually quiet that day. When I approached him, he smiled faintly. Hoa, I think my time is coming. I shook my head. Nonsense. You still have many years ahead. But he just patted my hand. That evening, as the wind howled outside, Tone passed away in his sleep. Peacefully. The entire village came to say their goodbyes. We buried him beneath the old banyan tree, the same place where we had once gathered before marching off to war. As I stood by his grave, I realized something. We had all survived, but in a way, a part of us had never left the battlefield. Years passed. Tina's workshop became one of the finest in the region, and his mother spent her final days surrounded by laughter. Nia, though he never fully healed from his wounds, found peace tending to the village's rice fields. And me? I watched over them all. One day, as the sun set over the fields, Mai sat beside me, her hand in mine. Do you still think about the war? She asked. I looked at the horizon, where the sky burned orange and red. Yes. But now, I remember it differently. Because despite everything we lost, we had gained something even greater, a chance to truly live. Time passed, and I had grown used to waking up to the laughter of children playing outside. Our small village had become a refuge for many old soldiers returning after the war. Stories of the past were still shared around the fire at night, but now they were no longer filled with pain and loss. Instead, they were the memories of a generation that had never surrendered. One afternoon, as I was crafting a wooden table for the village school, a boy ran into the workshop, panting. Grandpa Hoa, there's a stranger looking for you. I wiped my hands and stepped outside. A thin, middle-aged man stood by the gate, his body frail but his eyes filled with emotion. When he saw me, he trembled and spoke in a shaky voice. Hoa, is that really you? I froze. That voice, it was familiar, buried deep in the past. Who are you? The man swallowed hard, his eyes turning red. It's me. Lam. The young soldier who once marched with you. My heart stopped. Lam. The youngest soldier in our unit back then. I pulled Lam inside and poured him a cup of hot tea. As my hand rested on his shoulder, I could feel him trembling. You're alive. I thought you had died. My voice choked. Lam looked at me, his eyes heavy with years of hardship. After the last battle, I was severely wounded. When I woke up, I was in a prisoner of war camp. I held his hand tightly. I knew many soldiers had never had the chance to return home after the war. Some were lost in foreign lands, unable to find their families or their way back. I've traveled to many places, trying to find a piece of my past. I have no family left, but I remember my brothers. I squeezed his shoulder, my voice hoarse. You found the right place. This is still our home. Lamb broke down in tears for the first time after years of wandering. That night, I took Lamb to pay respects at Tone's grave, along with the others who had passed. Nia and Tin stood beside me, their eyes wet with emotion. Tone always talked about you, Tin whispered. He hoped that one day you would return. Lamb nodded, his tears falling onto the old wooden tablet bearing Tone's name. The next morning, I took him for a walk around the village. Children ran along the dirt road, and golden rice fields stretched as far as the eye could see. I never thought I would see this again, Lamb said softly. I looked at him, then out at the endless blue sky. The war took so much from us. But we are still here. We still have time to live and rebuild. Lamb remained silent for a long moment, then slowly nodded. That day, I knew another brother had finally found his way home.